Gaming is boring now, and it's time we all accept it. And before you ask, yes, I only play Call of Duty. Check out my no-scope. But seriously, it feels like every now and then someone claims that video games are boring now, they're bad, basically claiming that things are not as great as they used to be. And instead of jumping at them to tell them how wrong they are, I want to analyze this statement quite closely. Video games are boring now. Is that purely hyperbolic, or is there some truth there? And honestly, I can see why someone would agree or disagree with that statement. First, I want to dissect why people say this, and it boils down to a couple of things. One, AAA gaming has become quite grim. Let's face it, if you're a follower of the game industry, you would know that this past year has not been great. Every week we get news about a game studio that's laid off tons of people to just straight up being shut down, and it really makes it hard to be optimistic about the state of this industry, including the upcoming games. And this sucks because even the most talented developers don't feel safe working for these companies anymore, and it's hard to blame them. Need I bring up the incident with Tango Gameworks releasing the critically acclaimed Hi-Fi Rush? Even releasing an absolute gem of a game does not guarantee that your studio will remain in business. And it certainly doesn't help that games take so long to make nowadays and cost millions upon millions of dollars. Heck, maybe even close to the billions at this point. So when sales expectations aren't met, or your parent company spends billions of dollars on another company, then jobs are more likely put in danger, because God forbid a CEO take a pay cut. Another reason why people may find video games boring nowadays is that a lot of these big studios focus too much on graphical fidelity. And what happens when you do that? Well, not only does every game look the same, or close to the same, so much work is required to make these games look like real life that it causes game development to exceed half a decade. I mean, man, we used to get games quite often even 10 years ago, because development cycles ranged from about 2 to 3 years, not 4 to 7. Of course, those shorter development cycles might have been due to crunch, but that doesn't change the fact that crunch still happens in this industry, and it's just another thing that needs to change. But before I get too off track, it does become harder to maintain enthusiasm for a game series or even a development studio when you know you're not going to be playing their next game for the next 5 years. I go into this topic way more in my video, Realism is Killing Gaming, but stay with me here for this video because I will address that point even further as we continue. There's also the case of AAA games feeling less inventive than they used to be. And sadly, that's kind of to be expected since gaming is no longer a new medium. It had to innovate in its younger days, but now those times seem to be far behind us, and a lot of studios have seemingly found the quote-unquote winning formulas for their games. Let's think about Ubisoft. Man, I remember like 15 years ago, Ubisoft was just on top of the world for me. They had such a diverse lineup of different kinds of games, but these past few years, they've played it quite a bit safe, which goes back to the point of video games taking too long and costing too much to make, because why would you risk making something original when you can go for the guaranteed safe hit? There have been some unique ones from them in recent years, like Mario Rabbids and Prince of Persia, but really they seem to focus a lot on Assassin's Creed and Far Cry. And if you think there hasn't been a new Far Cry game in a while, well, you haven't played Avatar Frontiers of Pandora. Granted, neither have I, but I've mostly heard it's Far Cry with an Avatar skin. In general, there's just a lot of sequels coming out from different companies that barely iterate between games. I've already talked ad nauseum about Assassin's Creed and Far Cry, but there's also even Splatoon. I know you're gonna be mad at me for bringing this up, but really, how different is each game in this trilogy? Yeah, there are new modes and such, but the gameplay has barely changed at all between entries, and as a result, Splatoon 3 really didn't hit that hard for me and many others. And if we're talking about sequels that barely iterate upon each other, I can say the 3 letters we're all thinking of. COD. Not to harp on it for too long, but last year's Modern Warfare 3 was the ultimate offense to this. Had a very short campaign. It literally reused maps from Modern Warfare 2, the 2009 one. You'd think the development team only spent like 18 months working on this game. Oh, they did? And they charged how much for it? And how big is the game? Good lord. But now moving on from the sequels, let's talk about the industry's obsession with remakes and remasters, which is once again a symptom of these overly long development times. Companies gotta make money somehow while they spend 5+ years working on one game, so why not just release The Last of Us Part 1 and remaster Part 2? Even just now, Capcom is releasing Dead Rising Remastered, and they seem to be on track to remake every single Resident Evil game under the sun. Sega is also releasing a remaster of Sonic Generations with an additional Shadow side story. I'm asking you to subscribe to GameXplain and hit that notification bell to stay updated on more gaming topics like this one. Even Nintendo has been hell-bent on releasing tons of remakes and remasters. Granted, some of them are totally justified, like Paper Mario: The Thousand Year Door, Metroid Prime Remastered, but did we really need a Mario vs. Donkey Kong remake? If you can even call it that. Not to keep promoting my own videos in my video, but I also made another video about the Nintendo remasters. Check it out after this. I'll admit though, I am totally down for remakes and remasters because I am a nostalgic person. I love revisiting these games with shinier coats of paint, some of them completely remade to the point where they're a different game entirely, but therein also lies a good point. Why do we love these remakes and remasters so much? It's because they remind us of the so-called golden days of gaming, and we want to relive those years because gaming nowadays is just allegedly too boring. But I think the biggest offense of this generation are the trends that publishers want to follow. You know what I mean, right? The games as a service, the hero shooters, the battle royales. Basically, these game publishers saw the successes of Destiny, Overwatch, and Fortnite and thought to themselves, hey, I want to capitalize on this. It's just too dang bad video games take so long to make that these trends will grow tiresome by the time these games come out. And I'm not totally trying to devalue these experiences and the people that love playing them. Heck, sometimes I revisit Fortnite, and every time I do, it is a great time. It's just exhausting seeing these games come out that definitely look like responses to other games. Conquered, for example, you cannot convince me that this is not a knee-jerk reaction to Overwatch. And based on the amount of dislikes the trailer got, it's clear that people are getting tired of every game studio trying to become the next big viral sensation. Even Splitgate 2 looks like it's going the hero shooter route. Is nothing sacred! So right now I've given you quite a few examples of why gaming is boring now. But let me give you some examples of why gaming is actually the best it's ever been, arguably. 1, because indies are right there. We have more games now than ever before because of the overabundance of passionate game developers that are not restricted by deadlines, focus groups, and men in corporate suits. No, these are people, sometimes one person, making a game that they want to make. In fact, some of them blew up to be the biggest sensations of all, like Stardew Valley, Hollow Knight, Among Us. There are plenty of examples I can't think of off the top of my head. There's just so many games out there, too many even. And the best part is, they're usually not full-priced releases. Whereas the usual game is $60 to $70 full price, these can go as low as like 15 or even 10. On average, they're about 20 to 25. But still, that doesn't make them any less valuable. You'll still get plenty of hours of playtime out of most of these games. It's just that they're easy to miss because of lack of marketing, and let's be real, it's hard to compete with the marketing dollars of these AAA companies. I need to find the time to play these games, man. It's just that there's so many. I think a large majority of these people that say gaming is boring now only pay attention to the AAA space. Little do they know that there's a whole world out there with even more games that may not look as realistic, but it doesn't matter because they are fun anyway. They're so great. There's a lot of stinkers out there too, but really we don't talk about those. There's some great ones. Just go play those. But another reason why I think many people are sort of jaded about the gaming industry these days is because of nostalgia, which sort of blinds us in a way. A lot of us think about the good old days of gaming, where you could just pop in a disc or cartridge and the game would just play right away, which I'll admit is objectively better than popping in a disc and installing a 60 gig update, but even still, a lot of us look back on those times because We were kids, or at most young adults, with little to no responsibility. It's just so much easier looking back on that era with some rose-tinted glasses, because now we know what it's like on the other side. We've grown up, we've gotten jobs, we have rent or a mortgage to pay, and things are just overall busier than they ever were when we were children. I'm not gonna lie, there were things that were better about gaming back then. We didn't have to wait as long between game releases, and the consoles were just simple. You just put in your disc or cartridge and hit play, although there were still a lot of bad games during that time. Need I mention LJN? Or those movie licensed games? Another reason why I think we enjoyed games a lot more as a child was not just because we were blinded by blissful youth, but also we didn't get games as often. At least most of us did. I don't know about you rich kids. Still, I think I got a new game maybe once every other month, if that. I'm sure it was a lot less frequent, but because of that, I had to be very selective with what game I was getting. And when I got that game, I would dedicate so much time to that one title. It's not like nowadays where I pick up a game on sale, because games go on sale quite often at these digital outlets, and maybe I play it for a little bit before moving on to the next one, and then it's stuck in my backlog haunting me for the rest of my days. Therefore, gaming as a hobby might not feel as valuable to someone like me as much as it did back then. Let's be real, a lot of us probably only got 1 or 2 games per year, so in that sense we appreciated those games more. They were just way more valuable to us, which mostly can't be said today. So believe it or not, I did it. I saw both sides of an argument. I understand why there are people who think video games are boring now, but I can also counterpoint them with reasons why gaming is actually doing just fine. But if you do find yourself in the camp of thinking video games are boring now, just not getting the enjoyment you used to out of them, well, you've come to the right place, my friend, because I have a few tips for you if you want to get back into enjoying video games again. And it goes back to the indies. You should go and look for some indie games, or games from a smaller publisher even, like Thunderful. If you're in the mood for a specific genre, then just type that into the search bar of your favorite game outlet and let the results flow. If you have a PC, you need to check out the Steam store more often. It is a goldmine, especially with the wishlist feature. So if you can't buy a game right now, put it on your wishlist and you'll get notifications for when the game goes on sale. My colleague Tom even made a list of 10 games you should wishlist right now that he played at Bit Summit. So check that out after this video is over. But believe it or not, there are also games from the big developers, the big AAA publishers that might pique your interest because they also take creative risks sometimes. I'm going back to Ubisoft because I gotta give them some credit. They released Prince of Persia: The Lost Crown, a 2D Metroidvania, the last company I would have expected to do that, and if you haven't bought that game yet, I highly recommend it, especially if you're a fan of the Metroidvania genre. It's just too darn good. But there's also another game that just came out from Capcom called Kunitsugami Path of the Goddess. It's a unique blend of hack and slash and tower defense gameplay with strategy thrown in there as well, and if you love one or all of those genres, you should really give it a shot. Buying these games may not only be helpful to you, the person that's dying to enjoy something new, but it also communicates to these studios that we want more of these unique experiences. But if you're looking at these storefronts for new games and nothing really speaks to you, then it might be time to take a break from buying new games and instead tackle that backlog. If you have a backlog, which I'm sure most of you do, and there's nothing coming out for a while that you're interested in, then it might be time to go and take care of some of those games that you haven't played or haven't beaten yet. I'm doing that right now. I'm playing Warhammer 40k Space Marine before the sequel comes out, and it just hits for me right now, man. When I booted that up, I was so happy because it is exactly the kind of game that I was looking for. Just some shooty, pew, chainsaw, sword action. I love it. But if all else fails, there's no indie game that's speaking to you, there's nothing in your backlog you feel like visiting, then it's probably time to just hang up the cape, put your game consoles in the closet, and retire from the hobby. Temporarily. Seriously though, if games aren't making you happy, there's just no point in trying to force yourself to enjoy something. And the best part about being human is that we don't just have to have the one thing that makes us happy. So if video games aren't doing it for you, go spend more time with your friends and family. Not that you already weren't spending time with them, but maybe make more of an effort to do so. And while you're at it, go find a new hobby, or return to a hobby you haven't paid attention to for a while. Maybe you have a backlog of movies or TV shows that you've been sitting on for a while. I know I have. I will watch Better Call Saul one of these days, I swear. You can also learn a new skill, like I have this camera right here. I've been wanting to shoot more video on it, maybe make some short films here and there. That's just something I'm considering whenever I decide to put the controller down for a bit and do something else. And like I said earlier, I'm not saying to completely give up the hobby of gaming, I'm just saying give it a break, because you know what they say, absence makes the heart grow fonder. I know that's cheesy, but it really applies here. Give yourself a break from video games for as long as you need, and maybe you'll get the bug again. The bug will bite you right in the kazooie, thus reigniting the passion you have for video games. It's funny because I personally have not done this yet. I really haven't gotten bored of video games, but I feel like maybe at some point that will happen to me, and I'm fully prepared to do other things in this case. But I want to hear from you. Let me know in the comments, do you agree with the notion that video games are boring nowadays? Or at the very least, do you find yourself in a gaming rut? And if you got out of it, let me know how you did that in the comments below. Until next time, bye bye.